I see David's on. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi.
We've got David and Jason here. Just for anybody in the audience that doesn't know, my name is Charlie O'Donnell. I'm a partner with Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, and this is a series that by now I've been in this industry for so long that I think I could probably do a series of just really successful companies that I passed on, and just sort of a public flogging tour where I just go around and wait 10 years for everything that I passed on to prove me completely wrong. And it makes for good TV, I think, if nothing else. So
Well,
but
we won't beat you up too much.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So uh hold on one second. David, I think Lauren just told me you might have used Jason's link.
Yeah, I think he did.
um
I'll rename myself David Oak. I've always been trying to be Jason Richelson for my entire life, especially when,
so
especially when we work together. So here, I went ahead and changed that. There you go.
yeah, I just want to make sure if renaming is, oh, okay, cool. You don't have to do anything else besides having the right name. So good.
David's a Zoom master.
So just to kind of kick this off, I'd love to do this in somewhat chronological order. And Jason, can you just kind of set the stage for, you were an entrepreneur before this company, but in a very different type of business. Could you tell me like the initial origin story for the day that you thought this product should exist, what you were doing, and your background was at the time?
Yes. Well, I mean, I actually was taught how to program at Price Waterhouse as my first job out of college in '97. So I never actually ended up coding, but I've always been tinkering. And that job led to me starting, I actually left Price Waterhouse and started a payments company called Internet Cash in 1999 with a couple of guys to do basically online payments using prepaid cards that you would buy at 7-Eleven. And actually we had Zappos as an early user of our prepaid cards. So I've always been tinkering with stuff and trying to make stuff happen. That fell apart in 2000, and I went and started working at a trading firm, but then I left because I wanted to start my own business. And I started a wine store with Amy Bennett, which is still in Fort Greene, called The Green Grape. That grew to, it's coming all back again. I've told the story so many times in front of David, and I haven't told it in probably 6 years now. And that grew to a grocery store and then another store in Manhattan, which I still own the store in Manhattan. But then when I had the 3 stores, I was like, I want all my data in one screen, and I got all these client server systems in every location, and this is stupid. Like, let me switch to a cloud-based point of sale. So after looking,
and this is what year roughly?
This was 2008. Yeah, okay. So the summer of 2008, I was in, and then the last straw was that I was on vacation in the summer, and that server in the grocery store, which was doing a lot more transactions than the other stores, it literally crashed, and I had to log in remotely and revert to a backup to get it going again, and because the store was shut down. And then so I started looking for a cloud-based point of sale. I actually found some. Merchant OS, which actually got acquired by Lightspeed, was for bike stores. That didn't work for what we needed, but I didn't find any that would work for what we needed. So I just started. Actually, I on that same summer, I found a Rails engineer online. And he helped me build it. He basically like, I want to take this project and I'll help you build it. So we built it, and we built it like I build everything. So we built first the register, and it didn't do enough to work in my store. So we put it in the gift shop next door. She sold gift cards, and she just didn't really care about reports. She just needed to print a receipt. So it printed receipts and it took credit cards. It didn't do anything else. There's no reporting, no cloud-based anything. It just did that. And then I got some cafes using it, even though it didn't have a touch screen. This was pre-iPad, by the way.
Just to ask a quick question before you jump into other users. When you decided that this thing should exist, did you also decide at the same time that it could be a thing that other people would want to use and that it would be an entrepreneurial project, or were you just building a thing for your own stores?
Well, I was definitely building it to eventually sell.
Okay.
I don't know if I didn't have a strategy about how I was going to sell it and market it and go to market and all that stuff. I was just trying to make it work. And luckily, because I was already a retailer, like I knew all the businesses up and down the street. So I could find people. And anyway, I could walk into a store and be like, hey, I see you got this cash register. What if I put it in a computer? I'll give it to you. I'm going to set it up so it does exactly what you want. You can call me anytime if it doesn't work. And I found a lot of merchants that would do that. So you got to test stuff. And in my current business, Bookkeep, you need test customers. So my store is a test customer, in order to get data and make things work. So we got a bunch of test customers, and I mean, we wanted to build it for wine stores. We started trying to sell to wine stores. No wine stores wanted it because they already had point of sales. And they're like, I don't need to see it online. I got one store and it works. But then all these cafes needed a touchscreen system. So we actually started making it a touchscreen on a PC or a Mac. We actually built like a local app that ran on a PC and a Mac. So we started getting pulled that direction. But then when the iPad came out, eventually we decided, I had some guys who were iPad app developers in the office next door at the Hive. Actually, the Hive down in Lower Manhattan, a co-working space.
Yeah, sure.
It's a huge incubator for what happened here because some really great people helped me there. Matt Cullen, who was our designer, who really made, I like to joke, Matt made it look so cool that people wanted it, even though it didn't work, but it looked good. But basically we, and Ron Reeser, basically also who lived downtown, we basically decided after the iPad came out, all right, let's rebuild our app, our front end app onto the iPad. We did it. Ron did it in 2 months. He was a Rails engineer who knew a little bit of iOS, and he built it. And again, I then ripped out all the test customers, put the iPad in, tested it. And that's really when it started taking off. When there's a video, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but of me with a belly in my t-shirt, ringing up a sale, printing out a receipt from the iPad. I think it's the first video of any iPad point of sale ever.
Cool.
From 2010, maybe.
And just to point out like some of the context here of things that had to line up, right? Mm-hmm. You're a wine store owner and involved in some other retail businesses who happen to know how to code.
Yeah.
And the ultimate device that takes this thing that really is like the full, shows the full promise of this thing got invented roughly 18 months after you had the idea.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a super catalyst. Part of, and I think we did some really good SEO in the early days because actually Merchant OS was really good. That they got acquired by Lightspeed back then, but they did really good SEO. I kind of saw how they were doing SEO with cloud-based point of sale, and I just did the same thing with iPad point of sale. And I think we're still number one on SEO. But yeah, yes, I mean, so there's definitely a lot of luck, but you got to keep pushing in different directions, to figure out where you're going to end up going. Certainly none of it was totally planned.
I was just assuming you were the world's greatest trend forecaster. I wasn't implying that it was luck at all.
No, but I do tinker with so many things, including what I'm doing now, to realize that generally business-to-business accounting systems is where I tinker, that I just find holes. I mean, with what I'm doing now is a similar situation. There's a hole there in my new business that I'm starting. So, it's basically, I tinker, I see, I test. One of the good things is you got to really be able to find test customers, and you got to be like, for instance, just now, like I have an accountant for my new business and she's giving me access to all her systems to try and figure out this bug. And she's just like, here's the login. She trusts me. And you got to have those early customers and be able, and by the way, I said, she's like, I have a meeting, your numbers are wrong, you have to fix this. And I did. Spent an hour this morning, I fixed her numbers, I fixed her QuickBooks because we had an issue with it was really just a settings issue. But, you got to have that in the early days as you figure things out. And because you got to have feedback, you got to have test data. Everything I do is testing. I test everything. I don't know any other way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Jason is saying is just probably the reason for so much of Shopkeep's early success is that you're probably hearing the undertones of what can be just a master class of developing product market fit by
Yeah.
doing user discovery and just ultimate constant hustle. And
Yeah.
really, like when you see successful early stage businesses that are trying to get to that seed round, so much of what the successful founder does is just pick apart the problems based on
Hmm.
user discovery. Instead of all the decks I'm sure you see, Charlie,
Mhm.
where there's people coming to you that have a solution looking for a problem, right? Jason never did that. He was the customer who was
Yeah.
always, like he said, thinking and tinkering and just had this problem that he had to fix. But he didn't just go and here's a solution I'm going to build. He went to people like Joe Coffey. He went to
Right, Joe.
people, he went and I think it was Jonathan Rubinstein who told you, if you can put this on an iPad, I'll use it in
Yeah.
my store. I mean, that was the epitome of
There
using.
was, yeah, there was a lot of input because I actually was against the iPad. I was like, this is a fad. I don't know if this thing's going to last. I actually waited for a while to do it. But
Yeah, because it
then a
was an
lot of people are
investment.
like,
I mean, you had to like commit to building on that platform.
right. Yeah. But again, and then it's also luck. If I hadn't found Ron, who still works with me, he's awesome, who knew the Rails code, I didn't have to like say help him design him. Like, take this Rails code, rebuild it on the iPad. I didn't have to give him any specs. I'm just like, and he did it. And
Jason,
so
there's
there's
like a
definitely
hundred
luck.
Shopkeep. There's like 100 Shopkeep engineers that would question your assessment that you know how to code. I just want to.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Well, I actually, so back then I didn't really. I do now. Actually, I've
Just
taught
kidding.
myself the code since. But yeah, there's a lot of testing. But I mean, and then just fast forward though, Dave. If I had met David, I didn't understand how to deal with VCs. I didn't like to deal with VCs, and I didn't want to do any of that stuff. And if David hadn't grabbed the reins there, and or some, I don't think we would have been where we are now, because I really am a product person. I want to build the product. I want to make customers happy. I like working with customers and product. Having to deal with VCs talking to me about financial engineering stuff and all this, metrics, and your plan 5 years out is not right. You need to rejigger that. I don't want to do that. So having met David, that was, that really, then we got the funding, which helped us get more engineers. And, also our sales guy. I mean, Brian Zhang, who came in where we had 500 paying customers, I think. And he's like, you got all these customers with no salespeople? And we're like, yeah, we just put some YouTube videos up and people signed up online. And he's like, wow, okay, I'll join you guys. And then he built a sales machine, which
Well, let's
was
not skip too
super
far
cool.
ahead, because I want to go to that initial funding. So at some point, you had a product that people liked enough and
Mhm.
had some traction, and you made the decision that you wanted to put some gas on the fire. And um, I think when we first chatted, I was trying to figure out the timing of, had you started to talk to VCs before David got involved, or was it right around the
Oh
same
yeah.
time?
Yeah. And I don't know if yes, we want to put gas on the fire, but no, we put $600,000 of our own money into it by then. I mean, we had several employees. We were starting to pull off our 401k right when we were at the funding round. I think we had taken 100 grand out of a 401k, but we were able to put it back in time because the funding round closed in time. But no, we were like, I can't do this anymore with the money we had. But
Did you,
no, I was talking to VCs. Yeah.
just out of curiosity, did you put that money in because you wanted to get the product right before you took it to investors, or because investors just weren't quite there yet and it needed to get funded and it was just taking too long?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and I do it in my other businesses. I've done it before. I don't want to deal with investors generally, so I'd rather fund it myself and get to the point where it's like it's working. I have revenue. I need, we want to put fire on it now. I mean, that's what I'm doing with this current business. We are break even. We have customers. They're paying us. We don't need to take money, but we want to put money on on. But so no. Back then, it was more. I had to hire engineers. I mean, I couldn't write the code myself, so I had to pay engineers. I don't want to. didn't want to promise them that they were going to get rich on equity in the future. So I paid them, fair rates, but we still gave them equity, of course. And it just started burning. But no, I met David through a VC. I started meeting VCs and they started recommending operating people. And so I met David through that. And David basically from the first meeting said he was working for me. So, and he was, and he started,
David, why did you say
deck
that?
the next day?
David, why did you say that? Because a lot, and I asked that because there are a lot of folks who are watching who are in a similar position, right? Who like know their space, know their product, but the world of like VC and that whole thing is opaque, and they are looking for a partner who can do some of that stuff. And there's a lot of, exec business savvy folks out there. And I'm sure, you to this day, like you see a ton of that stuff. What stood out here that made you go, okay, like this is the company that I think I want to get involved with?
First of all, I just want to be clear. All I heard from Jason was David's the reason for our success. I'm just kidding. It's a good question. And like a lot of it is somewhat personal. Like for me, at the time I met Jason, I was in a place in my career where I was coming out of an M&A role at IAC, where I had met a lot of VCs, maybe wanted to be one of them, but I probably wasn't a very good deal guy. And I probably wasn't going to be a very good VC. And I was looking for something to be a part of that I thought I can add a lot of value to. And when I met Jason, I saw a lot of the things that some of the people in this audience are probably seeing right now, which is a passionate visionary who has a big idea that is excited about it, and I know is going to run through a brick wall to make it happen. And if there was some capital, we can probably build something. I also realized that this is a person that I could probably be a good yin and yang for. Jason shows up saying, listen, I want nothing to do with what you're probably good at. And I was standing there saying, even though at the time I probably had, I was your everyday douchey finance guy that was very self-important and thought that like I could do everything. But even so, I knew I didn't know much about point of sale. Certainly didn't know anything about talking to these retail customers. But it was interesting for me to watch Jason talk and tell the story, not so much to investors, but to our customers, because he was the customer. And there was this also major piece for me, which was IAC had a very robust local acquisition model. We had a number of companies that were spending a lot of money on a direct sales force to knock on the doors of people like Jason to sell them advertising. And I was fascinated that so many of these people, which are really hard to acquire, were starting to come to us directly because they were so underserved with what Jason knew was the problem from his customer discovery. They were underserved in that they had no customer support. They were underserved in that every single payment person was just ripping them off on payments. They were underserved because their technology sucked. And they were excited by this iPad thing that looked sexy because so many retailers cared about the look and feel of their store. So for me, it was fascinating to look at the, customer acquisition models of some of IAC's business, which spent so much on outbound local acquisition, and then see a model like Shopkeep where like, wow, if we had some money for this company, we could invest in some unique inside sales and marketing initiatives to drive local merchants to something. Which was unique for a piece of technology that doesn't exist yet. And you see that still in retail tech. A lot of people get very excited by retail tech businesses. They get very excited about the product that they've built. But so much in retail tech is less about the product, but how are you going to get to that customer? It's really great that you got those first 100 restaurants. How are you going to, what's your LTV to CAC? What are your unit economics? And for me, it was just great to be partnered with Jason because he didn't even want to think about those answers. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, well, if we can find the right investors, if we can find the right partners, which we did, who would believe in what we're going to do without trying to take a lot of ownership of the company in order for us to do it, then we can really make a mark with this first Series A slug.
And the product was, it wasn't a brand new thing though, right? We were building point of sale. Everyone needed a point of sale. Mm-hmm. And we were doing it cheaper. And by the way, I actually had spent 6 months trying to sell Microsoft's point of sale to retailers. And that led into Shopkeep because I knew so much about point of sale and technology. And I realized I couldn't sell a Microsoft Windows-based point of sale. It was too expensive for everybody. That kind of fed into my thinking. So I knew that people needed this. There was, if we could make it affordable.
Yeah, and the best founders are typically the best salespeople. And Jason tries to, make himself into this product guy, but he was really good at selling this product early on, which was critical to succeeding.
So David, what was your timing on you started engaging the company after or before the seed round?
Well, the first real institutional round of capital for this company was the Series A, but it was a $2 million round in 2011, which kind of feels like a seed now.
Gotcha.
And that's primarily because Jason and Amy did put a lot of their own money in the company for the last many years to get it to get what would be product market fit in what would be a typical seed round.
Gotcha. So when you guys engaged along those lines, tell me about the conversation of like, you say, I want to work with you. And then somebody needs to say, okay, what does that mean? Like, did you present here's going to be my title, here's the equity want? Like, how did that sort of negotiation get hammered out?
I don't really remember it, but I do remember, one thing that, yeah, I mean, it was pretty organic in that when I first met Jason in July of 2011, he was a little bit, he knew he had the tiger by the tail, but he was frustrated by the capital raise process. It was just something, amongst all the distractions and difficulties of getting the business to market, he just knew deep in his deepest that if we just had money, we can get going. And the VCs were giving him a hard time because he just wasn't in the club. Nobody knew who he was. He didn't like put the pitch deck together that they would like. So he was already having conversations with VCs. And when I met him, he was like, yeah, I'm going to see this one particular VC who would have been perfect to invest that eventually got to a term sheet. He was like going to see this person. And he's like, well, here's the deck. Let me know what you think. And my initial response was like, I was like, holy shit, Jason, you can't use this deck. This is like, here's just like 100 things I would do differently.
I still was just looking at that deck. Yeah,
I was like, look, you can't.
I'm doing decks again.
and then when I saw that deck, I was like, oh my God, this guy needs me. Like, oh my God, this is like, they're never going to raise capital. And so just like we made some tweaks and then he had the meeting and he came back to me. He's like, man, you were right. A lot of the things that guy said he was going to say, a lot of the things you thought he was going to say, he said. and then from there, it's just organic. I was like, look, let me just come on. You were
negotiating that your equity somehow like before the round was.
And I had a massive ego at the time, so I wanted like 100% ownership of the company. Mm-hmm. But we structured something where I came on and we actually Jason was smart about it. He gave me we structured some type of variable plan. Where of course it was
you had to hit certain targets on the fundraise actually.
Yeah, it was and it was smart actually. I don't know if I would advocate other people doing that because with other people there might have been perverse incentives. I just wanted to be a part of it, and I wasn't a very transactional person early on at that point of my career. I just really liked the premise of being so deep and having so much ownership in something I knew I could be a big part of. So I asked Jason for a very big number of equity, which is like real co-founder equity. And he said, sure, you can have that, but we have to hit these milestones. And
that was after 2 years of beating, Amy and I were figuring out everything until David joined. So, I mean, that's one of the things people don't realize with companies, like the amount of time we were for 2 years, we were working on this before like it even really became something. Like Amy and I were working on it before David joined. And it takes so long. People always make it sound like your company just started but you've probably been working on it for years to get where it is.
A lot of founders read too much TechCrunch. Sorry.
Along those lines, it's funny. I was just mentioning that to another company because they were talking about competition and the idea of having a head start on somebody. And it just really does take so long from idea to actually making it work that like unless your head start is more than a 2-year head start, which it rarely is, you better be doing something in an area where there's a reason why somebody else won't do, can't do, is too invested in doing it a different way or whatever, because you're as quick as startups are said to be, they're actually not that fast.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a while.
Yeah, for sure. So um, I think one comment I'll make on this is the fact that this wasn't some difficult, long, protracted negotiation, and the fact that it sort of came together organically, I think is sort of meaningful, because a lot of times I see in these early employee negotiations or co-founder negotiations that, like, if this feels difficult early on to sort of figure out what people should get and how they should work together, it's probably not likely going to work out later on. Like I'm sure this was sort of it's not an accident that you guys sort of were able to figure that part out.
Yeah, but it wasn't that easy. It was still, I mean, we had Amy as a co-founder and Bill Walton as well. And
Oh yeah.
it wasn't, they weren't in it day to day like I was in terms of finance. So they didn't understand what I needed and they couldn't help me, but they didn't understand why we needed David. But so it wasn't easy. It wasn't a walk in the park, but
I remember this now. It was like, I basically, when we came in, I kind of, it wasn't as easy as we're making it sound, because there were other people involved, and we basically just said, look, it's going to be, me and you just doing this now, and these other people that are kind of, they're not going to really be involved in the day-to-day, because it's just making it too hard to get things done, especially on the financing side.
But you have to, I mean, one thing I've realized actually now that this exit happened, I've been thinking about the last 10 years. I mean, you have to, some of the other partners just weren't comfortable bringing on new people because they didn't trust them. And I'm very easy to trust people, but I also realize, I mean, I check and I have luckily so far, a pretty good feel for it, but you gotta have more people on board. Like bringing on investors to them as well was like, we don't know these people, we're giving them a part of our company, but you know what? We wouldn't have this exit if we hadn't done that. You can't, right. You just have to, it takes a village to raise a company, basically. And so you have to get comfortable with that. For me, it's the same. I like to have all control, but I also can't do everything myself and I get overwhelmed. So, I mean, you just have to, you have to make good choices, hopefully. And we made, we didn't always make good choices, but anyway, you have to do it.
Jason, just out of curiosity, so you were focused on product and, on sort of the technical side, and you didn't necessarily want to spend time on sort of the finance and the fundraising and all that sort of stuff. How did that kind of work out as far as like titles and, because you stayed the CEO for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And like, I would just be curious actually, is like, if you could go back to when you started the company and say, okay, like, here's how being the CEO of this company is going to change over time. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things you would sort of prepare yourself with?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many mistakes made over these last 10 years, but I've given advice in the past. If you're the founder CEO, you need to make sure you stay the founder and CEO. However, you need to bring on people who are going to help you where you are weak. And when you're not the CEO, you have the vision. You just need to make sure that you're open to letting people help you get there and giving them the authority to do it. Because that was, we had some changeovers of CEOs, and the first one went very badly. That is, luckily we recovered from it. That really set us back a little bit. But yeah, I think it's better to stay the CEO and just bring people in. If you're weak in somewhere, you got to find someone who can help you in that space, and trust them. And hopefully you pick a good person. Because as the founder CEO, you really understand where the company needs to go, and a new hired CEO isn't necessarily going to be on the same wavelength, even if they think they are. They're just coming from a totally different world.
Yeah, one thing I've seen from, Shopkeep and some other companies that I'm involved in, and this is not specific to Jason, but I do see that a lot of, and Charlie, we've seen it together on companies. Like, companies tend to scale, and sometimes the team doesn't. And Shopkeep has had a lot of different, the evolution of Shopkeep, which recently sold at a big number as a big company. It's had like a long journey with a lot of different pieces. Like what we're talking about now, from like 2008 to 2000, say 15, is a completely different company, initiative, strategy, management company than the company that took it from 2015 to the exit, where he and I really weren't, I wouldn't say as involved, maybe as we'd like to be, but we just weren't involved. I mean, Mike DeSimone, like, basically took the company and built it into a massive organization. But I don't think he would have had the success if we didn't fund the company and if Jason didn't have this massive vision to begin with. So his comment about it taking a village is true, but it really depends on the company. And like, there's so many companies that are still founder led, and there's so many that aren't. And I do think each one is unique in its own right.
How would you guys answer the question of, like, there are some people in the audience who are thinking about their idea and they're not sure if they're cut out to be the CEO or if somebody else should be. What kinds of questions should they be asking themselves? And on the flip side, should they be worried about the possibility that maybe they come up short in some areas? Is it, can you learn on the job?
I mean, I think you have to be able to learn on the job and be open. I mean, I was very open. A lot of times, I think too much maybe I did, but like these VCs, and you guys see so many different companies. I don't have that worldview of, I've seen 10 companies do this and it didn't work. I don't have that worldview. So I deferred to the VCs a lot, because I was like, you guys have seen so much more than I have in this area. So go ahead. I think, but you gotta also, if you gotta stick to your guns if you think you're right. I mean, just in terms of marketing, we just did so many things in marketing that I saw over and over again, but we kept trying. I'm like, I've already seen this didn't work. And like, it's not going to work. This is not a space where people go watch on TV and look at point of sale. It's just not, it's not the way you find people. But yeah, I think, if you're a founder CEO and you got the product started and you got through the funding round, you need to look for VCs to say, hey guys, I want to stay the CEO. I can do this, but I know I can't do everything. You got to help me find people, so that we're a team who can fill in where I don't want to do things or I can't do things. Because I mean, I think even VCs will say, founder-led companies are generally, if the founder's still running the company, they are better exits. I think I've read something like that. In general.
Well, and also, like, I think a lot of the reasons why VCs say that is because ultimately the big secret about
want to be founder friendly
is that VCs are lazy and really don't want to do any work. And it's much more work to go out and hire a CEO. So if we don't have to replace the CEO, it's less work. We could.
I would like to just respond real quick because, I'm the CEO of my company now, and it's not always like a role. I don't understand why people want the role sometimes, candidly. And it's not, it looks good on paper, right? But if you think about it, the role of a CEO certainly changes as the size and nature of the company does. But generally speaking, if you're questioning whether or not you should be a CEO, a good CEO is especially a founding CEO, is the person who's gonna, hire, inspire, retain, and never run out of capital, right? They're gonna set long-term and short-term strategy, and then they're gonna be a cheerleader and information radiator as they get a team in there to execute on clear goals. And if you're not good at that, right? If you're an individual contributor, if you don't have a lot of emotional awareness, if you don't take all the drama out of the room, if you can't like set clear goals, manage a culture, and like be a cheerleader for your team and find a lot of leverage, you might still figure out how to be a good CEO if you can surround yourself with people, but you're going to be a miserable CEO, right? So I think that's like the better way to think about it, right? I've learned so much from, again, like Mike, who ran the company for a long time, just like watching him operate from the sidelines. It was like, it was nice to see, like watching other CEOs where I'm on the board who are better CEOs than me. They're very, very good at managing people, their emotions, setting goals, and just being pragmatic and unemotional with everyone around them. Plus, they're also good at managing the board. I mean, I've gotten better at it, but I'm not, one thing that I learned throughout this journey and also from my current company is, and Jason kind of said this, but differently, it's, you got to cultivate really good relationships with your financial partners. And not just at board meetings, right? You got to be open and transparent. You have to share bad news and good news, especially VCs. They're not going to react. They've seen it all. And if you develop things like a monthly operating package, and if you're talking to people who are heavily invested in your success, I think these are your supporters. You just have like an easier time. Like, and they're not going to try to pull inception tricks and get you to realize that you shouldn't be the CEO. They're going to trust you to take feedback, right? If you don't react badly to it. Anyway,
I totally agree with that. And that's actually one of the struggles I think that early first-time founders have is I just took money from a bunch of people. They're expecting a lot of me. Things aren't going exactly as planned. Or, okay, I got to this point. I don't know exactly how next year is going to go. So you're asking me to a budget, goals, to set vision. Like I'm lucky I know what's going on next week. And I have to do all of this sort of stuff. And I think there's a fear and an apprehension of, I don't want all these people all up in my grill and second guessing my decisions and all of this sort of stuff. It is very scary to first time founders. So what would you tell those first time founders?
Well, I mean, David said it very well. You have to just be open. I mean, to learn new things. And you have to, obviously tell the VCs what's really going on, but there's no way they're not going to know. I mean, you give them the numbers, they're going to see the numbers. So you can't hide that. You should never try and do that. I don't think we ever try to do that ever. But it never goes according to plan. And everyone knows that you plan as your best case and it's not going to go according to plan. But as long as, what do you say? Best intentions, Dave, like you always had best intentions. We this is a plan we tried to hit. We've hired the best people we can. And as long as you're focused on it, you'll figure it out. If the product market fit is there, eventually you'll figure it out.
So you guys talked about the idea of, or the stages of Shopkeep's journey. And at some point, you made some management changes to sort of take things to the next level. What are some of the things that Shopkeep just like, whether it was how they were positioned as a company that enabled that team to be successful? Like what were they sort of starting with that was the core of what became a really good exit? If you sort of think about where you're trying to get to be in a good place to put, to set management up for success.
I mean, I think it's just like the fact that it's such a massive market was so critical for Shopkeep's success. I mean, I think there are times where Jason might not agree, but I think there were times where we tried to fuck it up as much as possible, and thank God it was a massive market. Right?
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. Like we would fight. They're like, and I think but I definitely think just having a large market and a great vision, some validated competitors out there that were doing some of the things we were doing, and also Jason always used to say payments especially is a place where there's been, 30 years of innovation unencumbered by progress, right? This is not a space where you've seen products like this. So I definitely think that helped. I mean, it's such a big market, even now. Yeah.
And it's a market where I think the customer base was like generally not well served. Like they just didn't feel like, yeah, sure, there were lots of other products, but nobody loved them. And I think that's helpful too. So
yeah, definitely. Nobody loved their point of sale. Even still, people don't like their point of sale.
Except for Shopkeep customers.
No, I don't think anyone likes any point of sale. But it really was it was even more difficult back then. You really had to know how to manage a server and all this stuff. So it was an easy switch at the time. Now I mean, almost all point of sales are cloud-based. So it's a little harder.
But just imagine, even in like 2014, 2015, you have a family, you're running a retail store or you're a restaurant, and it's like 2 a.m. and you're doing tip adjust. All right. It's, these are very, very underserved customers. So, and for the first time, they're really getting technology. That's not hokey loyalty stuff. It's like real operating, get more time in your day, operating systems to run your business better. And I think that's what Lightspeed and Shopkeep are doing well, and Square is doing well.
So if I do decide to bring on a business partner or even a CEO, you guys had the experience of being on the board and in and around the company as major shareholders when you brought in a CEO that didn't work out and then brought in somebody who ultimately was successful. What were some of the traits that you could say in hindsight now would be things I should be looking for if I'm going to bring somebody else in to run the company?
I mean, that's really hard. I mean, we weren't looking for a CEO, we were looking for a COO. And then the person that we brought on asked to be the CEO at the last minute. And I was like, he seems like he knows what he's doing, maybe more than I do. So maybe we'll try and be co-CEOs. That didn't end up working out. But and then I decided I let him handle a lot of the stuff, and then I just kind of
didn't want it back
out of it. Yeah, I mean, I didn't want it back. That was for sure. But I also didn't like where the direction that we were going. But I don't know. It's super hard to do. You know what I like though? I mean, if you not talking about a CEO, but like what David did, and what has happened with good people that I brought on is that they don't come in asking for a job. They come in and they just start helping you without asking for anything. Like David redid the deck. We've had attorneys who started with us who, I'm just going to send you these documents and, here's what you need. Okay, what do you want to raise? I'll put the documents together. No, here's what our cost is. It's just like, we're just going to work with you. I mean, if they think that if they trust you and they're not con artists, you got to have a good feel for that. But most good people come in, they just start helping you and showing you that they can help you before they promise you they can help you. Anyway, that's worked out for me mostly.
David, any comments on that?
It's so hard, especially if it's your brainchild, right? And when you start these companies, like this is Jason's brainchild, and it starts it's like any other child, right? It starts as an infant that you just kind of want to keep alive, that you have to feed. And then before you know it, it's a toddler. You're trying to keep it from falling down the stairs. And then like for me, Shopkeep for the last 2 years has been like that kid in college. Every now and then I see a Facebook picture. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And then it brings home, it's laundry, and you don't want to get involved because it has to live its own life and you don't want to annoy it. At the board level, I just kind of tortured everybody, is my sense. But I think as the journey continues, I think personally, I failed forward. I don't think I was very good post Shopkeep for the company all the time. And I think it's because I just, I didn't learn how to cultivate people properly. It was, I wanted to be involved in something that was no longer my company to be involved in day to day. So when you're hiring these people who are going to take your vision, your hard work, your brainchild forward, I think you need to make sure that there's alignment across the board on not only just like vision but there's a level of truth and honesty and personality mix. And I think then it's healthier. I also think, and sometimes it's just not possible, right? Sometimes the company is at a place where, and this wasn't the case with Shopkeep, but I do see it when there's difficult founder transitions. And, the founder or the person who's the CEO, the VCs just want that person out of there. And it's never going to go well. it's just not going to go well. And investors have rights. And I think also sometimes founders don't realize that they're no longer owners of the companies.
Right. That's what I wanted to say is you have to be able to give up control. You have to be okay giving up control. But it's not a bad thing because, your board, your VCs, as long as they're really focused on making the company successful as the company, regardless of their other investments and whatever happens in VC world, then, they're there to help you and you guys are a team. So you have to be able to give up control a little bit. Ideally, you stay the CEO if that's the best decision, but, they're going to help you grow that company. So you have to give up a little control.
That's the trust element, right? Like if you can be mature, unemotional, and just trust others who, are in the same boat as you, they want the best for the company as well. You can have your disagreements, but when you're no longer at the company and controlling the decisions that are made, you have to put yourself in a position where people want to hear what you have to say. Not because they have to, but because they want to, right? And we have a board, like Brian Hertz especially, like nobody's been a bigger supporter of this company from like day one. Like Brian would tell you at any given point, it's $1 billion company. He was always putting more money in the company. He was always super supportive of the business, more than a lot of VCs I've seen at companies that go up and down, right? And Shopkeep wasn't always a rocket ship. Right? Brian was very supportive of the company when he didn't necessarily have to be. So I would say like fostering relationships with these people so that they want to hear your opinion, because I could tell you even sitting here last year, I don't think I was on the board at that point and not being close to the company, I still know everything that's going on, right? I still talk to the employees all the time. They still reach out to me. I still know everything I get board decks that I probably shouldn't get, right? And, like, you want to be in a position where you can pick up the phone and call the CEO and just say, hey, I think this thing. And you want that person to really care and not just blow smoke up your ass or hang up the phone, right?
It's important though. I mean, the mistake that I think I made was I didn't like to deal with the investors really. So I let David do it, but you really have to also be dealing with the investors. I literally just was like, I just don't want to deal with this stuff. But I didn't have a great relationship with them. And I think that was definitely a mistake. But honestly, there's just too many inputs. For me, I literally can probably only handle 2 or 3 people working for me at any time. I can't talk to 15. I mean, there's just so many people involved. And we had a pretty big board. So it was just really hard. David's very good at talking to a lot of different people. I wasn't, but in the end, I think, you definitely have to have a good relationship with your investors as the founder, whatever, starting person, and not give that up.
So I want to just open it up because we got our first question, and I have something else I want to ask. But if anybody in the chat or the Q&A section wants to add, happy to pass on those questions. Both of you have gone on to start other things. And I'm curious as to how you might be doing things differently this time around as founders and CEOs of new companies.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, you want to start off? Or?
Well, the new company I started with Ruth, who was at Shopkeep. So we started together. She's the CEO. I'm the CTO. And so that kind of works out with I don't want to manage the whole company. I want to build the product. I talk to customers all day. I'm talking to accountants and bookkeepers all around the country, all around Canada, almost all around the world now through Intercom, and getting feedback and fixing the product. And that's what I want to do all day. And that's what makes the product great. And actually it's great for marketing and it's great for product development, of course. And I'm not dealing with setting up payroll. I'm not dealing with, making the deck perfect. I certainly help with all those things. and she's much better at management, and just making the trains run on time, which I get, bogged down on a bug or a product feature, and like 2 days later, I'm like, wait, what happened over the last 2 days? And but no one else understands how everything fits together like I do. So I think the relationship is working really well. And I don't want the CEO title for sure. I like what I'm doing, and you have to know what you fit, what you're good at.
Cool. David?
Oh, I think I'm a case study in someone who's very good at getting in their own way historically. So I'm trying to learn from those mistakes. And a lot of them have primarily been, um, like just like removing all the emotion out of the room, and, cultivating relationship, having zero confrontation with anybody all the time, as its base, but also realizing with respect to capital raises is that, and, whenever you raise outside capital, that person's business model tends to become yours. So, I want to make sure that I'm raising capital from people who I can generate a real return for the business that I'm running today. And that's been an important lesson, because a lot of people go out to raise venture, that maybe shouldn't, or they do it at valuations where they wind up with some huge pref stack that they're never going to be able to support based on where the business is in its life cycle. So those are really the learnings for me. It's just been the day-to-day, personal, dealing with the responsibility. It's hard to be the founder and CEO of a company because you are on an island, right? You can't go home, and even running a fund, I'm sure is the same thing. If it's your fund, you can't really go home and tell your life partner how you're doing because they just worry. So you can't be all honest all the time. You can't tell your co-founders or your employees how you really feel because they just need to be led more than anything. They don't want to hear that stuff. Boards tend to react, right? So, customers want to return, vendors want to get paid. So you're typically on an island. And I've just learned to deal with that better, by finding balance in the day-to-day and just focusing and not getting distracted.
And apparently doing a ton of baking.
I do a lot of baking, Charlie. It's cathartic, man.
Your Instagram is full on, like, how I think you should be checking your blood sugar on a regular basis, because I don't know if you're doing the eating, but the baking looks fantastic.
Well, I live in the suburbs now, so I'm like a suburban dad, and I bake for the whole street. They all love it. It's how I made friends, basically.
Nice. So one question that I think dovetails to what you were just saying about how, employees want to be led and everybody sort of wants to be doing their thing. As you guys sort of shift roles and bring people in, how do you kind of manage the company morale? You've got this big company, everybody's doing their own thing, and all of a sudden, there's a new person coming in, and all of that sort of stuff. Do people worry? How did you message it, or how should people message it?
And I think when we were there, we didn't do a great job, but I've definitely learned how to do a better job and what you should do. I mean, maybe Jason disagrees, but I think, like,
went and drank a lot.
Yeah, no, look, I've realized, actually, I think Mike said this, is that like when people leave a company, they're either going to something or they're running away from something. And you never want to create an environment where people are running away from something. So as long as a company has a good culture and everybody is aligned with the vision and the general direction of the company, they're going to be flexible to such things, if not even excited, right?
I want to actually say something on that. That's so right. We had a really good all-inclusive culture. We hired all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life. We hired engineers who never officially studied engineering, but they were good. We hired all kinds of different people, and that culture. And then also we opened in Belfast and we opened in Portland. I really love what I saw. Dax De Silva from Lightspeed, the CEO, he actually said in an article for the Canadian Financial Times or something, that it was the cultural fit that was a really big selling point for him with his company. And I was really proud to see that. I was very happy to see that. So I think, having an inclusive culture, we were very honest, I think, with our employees, at least, the time we were running it. And I think it's continued. I mean, a lot of the people are still there after we left. I think D. Simone's done a really good job, and he's a really good manager as well. And he kept everything going.
Yeah, was also like, we had like, I think there was a time where if we had, like, we had like there was a time where we had 150 employees. I think like 50 of them like played musical instruments. And like the company was on top of the city winery. It was a shitty office. The heat didn't work. We had one bathroom. They do a sound check every day, but we would still go down there and drink at the bar and have wine with each other. They would make like Shopkeep wine with us. But but I think it's important to discuss the tactical elements of managing employees that I've learned over time. And there's like really simple things you can do to align a culture for a company. Because as companies grow, each functional area gets very siloed. And it also changes, right? You go from product organizations to all of a sudden having a sales force where everybody's very coin operated. And when you have dynamics like that, the leadership team has to do everything they can to create the glue and stickiness. And it's things like having a weekly all hands, which is something that Google does in a very predictable fashion. It's the little things like the CEO being that information radiator. It's silly things that like maybe sound trite, but when you read about it in Tony Hsieh's like Delivering Happiness, things like culture books, setting a, like I always tell founders these days to set your brand positioning really early, because by going through that, you tend to develop the mission, the vision, and the core values of the company. And then everybody's aligned on what those core values are. And then you hire in accordance to that. And before you know it, you have a culture that you don't really have to put your shoulder into. It just naturally develops. And these are like the little things you can do to manage the companies culturally. And like workplace management, there's so many workplace management solutions now that, at the time didn't exist when we were there. We tried to kind of have a ping pong table, a pool table, and a kegerator, right? But there's other ways to do that now. There's there's firms whose entire existence exist to manage the workplace employee onboarding, offboarding, make sure they're happy, make sure people are talking and constructing a cadence so that there's glue. Anyway, I don't mean to go on and on. I've had a lot of coffee, but
management is a skill. I think I don't think it's something that I've been able to learn. Some people are just really talented at managing, listening, understanding, a big team. That is, if you don't have it, you need to bring some people in who can do that.
Well, and I think you have to have the desire to want to do it too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's learning to code or learning to be a manager, or you have to know what that entails and then want to be good at it, right? It's very easy to think, oh, I want to learn how to code. And then once you get into the day-to-day of coding, you realize, oh, I don't actually like the day-to-day of coding because I didn't realize what it was.
Right.
Management's sort of the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, like I really, really appreciate the transparency and the honesty. And, we all know that all of these success stories have lots of ups and downs and twists and turns along the way. But I think that your sharing of that narrative was just like really, really authentic. And I just really, I knew that would be the case when I asked you guys to come on, just knowing a little bit about your personalities. But I really appreciate the time that you were willing to spend with us.
Yeah, this was really straightforward and easy. It was all me.
You can tweet that, sure. All right, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And good luck in your businesses too.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, guys.